The night the word went out, Harlem was already sick. Dope fiends lie on brownstone steps with their mouths open. Little glassine bags, the size of a postage stamp, sat crushed in the gutter. Mothers pulled their kids off the street before dark because the hallway of almost every building had one junkie slumped in the corner. That night, men who sold heroin on those corners got a message. You've got 24 hours. Pack up your stuff. Get out of Harlem. The message came from one man, Bumpy Johnson. People in Harlem called him the Godfather, the mayor, the man. Whatever you called him, you listened. Bumpy did not send letters. He did not post signs. He sent people. And when those people spoke, it was the same as if Bumpy himself was standing right there with a gun in his hand. This is the story of why he gave that order, how he tried to push heroin out of Harlem, and what happened to the dealers who thought he was bluffing. To understand it, you have to see what Harlem was before heroin fully hit. In the 1,930 seconds and 40 seconds, Harlem was loud and alive. Jazz poured out of every club. People dressed sharply even when they were broke. There was crime, of course. Policy numbers, card games, hustles in back rooms. Bumpy Johnson came up in that world. He started as an enforcer for a woman named Stephanie Street Claire, the Queen of Harlem. She ran the numbers racket, the illegal lottery poor folks played for a chance to pay their rent. Bumpy was smart. He read poetry, played chess, and knew the law almost as well as a lawyer. But he could also break your jaw with one punch. That mix of brains and muscle made him rise fast. By the 1,940 seconds and 50 seconds, he was the man who sat between Harlem and the Italian Mafia. The Italians controlled most of the big money rackets in New York. They wanted Harlem too. But they found out you could not just walk in and take it. Not while Bumpy Johnson lived there. Bumpy made deals with Italian bosses. He kept the peace on the streets. If a white mobster wanted to open something in Harlem, he came to Bumpy first. If a black hustler had a problem with the police or with another gang, he went to Bumpy for help. People said if Bumpy liked you, you were safe. If he didn't, you were as good as buried. But even a man like Bumpy could not stop one thing: heroin. Heroin began creeping into Harlem after World War II. At first, it was quiet. A few veterans, a few musicians, some kids who thought it was just another high. The Italian families, especially in East Harlem and downtown, were behind much of the traffic. They had their pipelines from overseas. They had labs and chemists. Harlem had the street customers. At the start, it looked like just another hustle. One more illegal product to sell. But within a few years, the change was clear. Numbers players used to bet a nickel and go home. Junkies sold the rent money, the radio, the baby's milk. Men who had never stolen a thing in their lives started snatching purses. Young girls disappeared into rooms with strangers for $5 in a bag. Bumpy watched this happen from his regular table at Wells Restaurant, from his walks down 7th Avenue, from the steps of the Teresa Hotel. He saw it in the shaking hands of old ladies asking him, "Mr. Johnson, can you do something about these dope peddlers?" People came to him crying. My boy was on the honor roll. Now he's up on 125th, scratching his arms to the bone. Mr. Johnson, they're selling that stuff right on my stoop. I told them to move, and they laughed in my face. Bumpy was not a saint. He robbed, he extorted, and he even killed when he thought it was needed. But he had one rule he kept saying to his men: we don't eat off our own people's weakness. He could live with gambling. He could live with numbers. He could live with taking from rich people and crooked landlords. But he hated heroin. The story many old-timers tell goes like this. One night, Bumpy was sitting in his car on a side street off Lenox Avenue. A young boy, no more than 12 or 13, walked up to the window. His eyes were glassy. His shirt was dirty. He held out his hand and whispered, "You got $1, Mr. Johnson? Please, I just need $1." Bumpy knew the boy. He knew his mother. He had seen the kid running errands for drug men on the corner. "What do you need $1 for?" Bumpy asked. The kid shifted from foot to foot. "Just $1. Please." Bumpy looked him straight in the face. "You using that poison?" The boy could not answer. He stared at the ground. That was it. Bumpy told his driver to pull off. He was quiet the whole ride home. The next day, he started calling his lieutenants. Word spread that there would be a meeting at Small's Paradise, one of the best-known clubs on 7th Avenue. No jazz, no dancing that night. Just folding chairs and a lot of serious faces. You had Italian guys from downtown. You had black numbers, runners, club owners, prostitutes, and street soldiers. You also had a few men known as the big dope wholesalers in Harlem, the ones who sat above the corner boys. Bumpy walked in late, like a king. Dark suit, hat tilted, eyes sharp. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. He looked around the room and said, "Heroin is killing Harlem." Silence. "You all know me. You know I am not a preacher. I am a businessman. I know everybody's got to eat. But this right here is different. That powder is turning strong men into rats. It's putting mothers out on the street begging for money. I'm not having it. Not on these blocks. Not while I'm still breathing." One of the drug men, a slick fellow in a silk tie, tried to speak up. "Bumpy, the kids want it. If we don't sell it, somebody else will. Why are you worrying about it? It ain't your business." Bumpy stepped toward him. The room tensed. "Everything in Harlem is my business," Bumpy said. "From the bar stool to the church steps. I'm going to make this plain so even a fool can understand. You got 24 hours to move your operation out of Harlem. You want to sell that muck downtown, in Brooklyn, in Jersey, I don't care. But by this time tomorrow night, if you're still pushing dope on these streets, I'm coming for you myself." Nobody laughed. Nobody said he was bluffing. They knew his record. Years before, when Dutch Schultz threatened the Queen of Harlem, Bumpy had gone to war and bodies had dropped. When a man crossed him over a numbers bank, that man vanished. People found his car still parked at the curb with the engine warm. No one ever found him. So when Bumpy gave that 24-hour order, heroin dealers had a choice: leave or test his word. The first reaction was fear. Runners on the corners started whispering. "You hear what Bumpy said? 24 hours. Some packed up that same night. They sold their last bags cheaply and hopped cabs to the Bronx and Brooklyn. Others waited to see what their bosses would do. The wholesalers had bigger decisions. Heroin was bringing them more money than they had ever made before. A man who once struggled to clear $50 a week now made hundreds a day. Cars, suits, women, tables in fancy nightclubs, it all came from those glassine envelopes. Some of them tried to work around it. "We'll just pay Bumpy a cut," they told each other. "He's a businessman. He'll understand." They forgot one thing. This order was not about money. Within hours, Bumpy's men were moving. They walked into bars, pool halls, and tenement basements where heroin changed hands. They did not ask questions. They just delivered the message again, face to face. "You got until tomorrow night. After that, don't say you weren't told." An old woman on 135th Street watched as two of Bumpy's lieutenants walked house to house. She heard them knock. She heard them say, "Tell your nephew. Tell your cousin. Tell that boy on the corner. 24 hours. The clock was ticking. Down in Little Italy, some of the Italian bosses got nervous calls. "Bumpy's trying to shut down the dope in Harlem," their black partners said. "He's serious." The Italians sat around their tables with glasses of wine and thought it over. Harlem was a major market. But they also knew something else. Bumpy Johnson was not a man you wanted as an enemy inside Harlem. He could stir up boycotts. He could tell his people not to do business with certain bars or stores. He had pull with some cops and politicians. If things got too hot, the police might suddenly become very interested in Italian-owned businesses. So some of the mob bosses told their drug men, "Pull it back for now. "We'll figure something out later." Others shrugged and said, "It's just talk. Sell a little quieter, that's all." The deadline came. The next night, Bumpy took a slow ride through Harlem. He moved block by block, from 110th up to 155th, from 5th Avenue over to Street Nicholas. At every corner, he already had eyes. If a known dealer was still out there selling, Bumpy would know. On many corners, the usual faces were gone. A few had gone to the Bronx. A few had moved indoors, trying to sell behind locked apartment doors. Others were just hiding, hoping the storm would pass. But some men stood their ground. On one corner near 145th, a tall dealer named Sonny refused to budge. Sonny told his friends, "Bumpy's old. He just came home from prison again. The world is changing. You can't stop this money." Around 9 that night, Sonny saw 2 black sedans roll up. 4 of Bumpy's men stepped out. They were dressed in suits, not street clothes. That alone told Sonny this was serious. One of them said, "Boss wants to see you." They drove Sonny to a back room of a restaurant that Bumpy used as an office. Bumpy sat at a table with a cup of coffee in front of him. No music played. The room was cold. "I gave you 24 hours, Bumpy said. Sonny looked down. "I was going to move my stuff, Bump. I just needed more time." Bumpy shook his head. "Time's up." What happened next is told in different ways by different people. Some say Bumpy slapped him and threw him out of Harlem, told him if he ever saw him north of 110th Street again, he'd be carried out. Others claim Sonny took a walk with 2 of Bumpy's men and never came home. What we do know is that Sonny was gone from Harlem after that week. His corner belonged to someone else, and it did not sell heroin for a long while. Similar scenes played out across the neighborhood. A dealer on 125th was taken to a basement and beaten so badly that he left the city for good. A younger boy who had just started selling was given one last chance. Bumpy paid his bus ticket south and told him, "Go back to your mama." One mid-level supplier woke up to find his car burned out and his stash missing. A note on his door said simply, "Move." Bumpy was not trying to pretend he was a moral savior. He was enforcing his own kind of law. In his mind, numbers and gambling were vices people chose with clear heads. Heroin was a chain around the neck. And that chain, once locked, was almost impossible to break. He also had another, less noble reason. Heroin brought a different kind of trouble. Addicts robbed and mugged without thinking. That brought police heat. Detectives, newspapers, politicians, everybody suddenly wanted to clean up Harlem. When that kind of heat came, it did not care about the difference between a numbers banker and a dope kingpin. It fell on everybody. By pushing heroin dealers out, Bumpy was also protecting his older businesses. Some people today say Bumpy himself later took a quiet piece of the heroin trade through younger men like Frank Lucas. Men who knew Bumpy argue about this to this day. The truth is messy. What is clear is that, at least for a period, he tried hard to set rules. No selling to kids. No open dealing on certain streets. No cutting the product so weak that users overdosed and died. In simple words, he wanted control. For a while, it worked. Old-timers say that after his 24-hour order, you could walk down 7th Avenue and feel the change. The loud calls for dog food, horse, good smack faded. Junkies had to work harder to find their bags. Some left Harlem entirely, following the drug to other boroughs. Churches and community groups said they saw a brief drop in overdoses. But heroin is like water. It finds cracks and slow paths. Over time, dealers adapted. They moved deeper into tenements. They sold in after-hours joints that paid protection money to people Bumpy could not easily touch. Some younger hustlers simply did not care about his rules. They saw him as the old guard, the past. Their future, they thought, was in white powder. This led to a second wave of tension. Bumpy, already aging and facing health problems, had to choose how much war he could fight. He had done federal time on a drug conspiracy case before and did not want to go back. The police were listening on phones, watching the streets with unmarked cars. If he went after every small dope dealer with guns and fists, sooner or later, there would be a big case built around it. So he focused on the worst offenders. If a dealer sold to school children, Bumpy's men visited him. If someone hurt a neighborhood woman for drug money, Bumpy might quietly pay the woman's doctor bill and then make sure the attacker never walked through Harlem again. In this way, he became, in the eyes of many, part gangster, part guardian. You can see the conflict in the way people talk about him even now. Ask one old man, and he will say, "Bumpy Johnson kept heroin off my block. We loved him for that." Ask another, and he will tell you, "Don't be fooled. He was in the game too." Nobody in Harlem got rich off drugs without paying somebody. Both things can be true. A man can try to protect his people and still be part of the same dark world that hurts them. By the mid-1960s, Bumpy's health was failing. He had diabetes. Years of stress, prison food, and rich restaurant meals had taken their toll. The streets were also changing fast. Young dealers like Nicky Barnes were rising. The heroin money was now too big for old codes. The Italian Mafia deepened its grip on the pipeline. New routes from Southeast Asia, through places like Vietnam, were starting to open. The flood was turning into a tidal wave. On the 7th of July, 1968, Bumpy Johnson sat in Wells' restaurant in Harlem, eating chicken and waffles, when he had a massive heart attack. He died right there, in the place where he had settled so many street problems. People say that, when the word spread, gamblers, prostitutes, musicians, and church ladies all cried. Traffic stopped as his body was taken away. Whatever else he had been, good or bad, he had been a force in their lives. And almost as soon as he was gone, heroin poured back in at full strength. Within a few years, the 1,970 seconds turned many Harlem blocks into open-air drug markets. The new kingpins did not care about Bumpy's old rules. They set up right on the corners where he had once banned dope. Lines of addicts waited for their bags in broad daylight. Whole buildings turned into shooting galleries. Children stepped over needles on their way to school. People looked back at the time when Bumpy had given those dealers 24 hours and said, at least then, somebody tried to hold a line. It did not make him a hero. It did not wash away the blood on his hands or the fear he caused. But it showed something about Harlem itself in that era. Crime and protection were mixed. The same man who might have your cousin beaten for snitching could also be the one who made the drug man move away from your front stoop. In the end, heroin proved stronger than any one man, even a man with Bumpy Johnson's reputation. But that 24-hour order still lives in the stories of the people who were there. They talk about the night fear changed sides, when it wasn't the junkies and grandmothers who were scared, but the dealers looking at the clock, wondering if they would make it out of Harlem before Bumpy came knocking. So when you hear older Harlem folks say, there was a time when one man could still tell the drug dealers to leave, this is the story they mean. The night heroin flooded Harlem, and Bumpy Johnson told every dealer, "You have 24 hours to get out, or you will answer to me."